Welcome to Tritiyo Matra. The United States recognized Bangladesh as a sovereign nation-state on April 4, 1972. Today, on the 50th anniversary of such a monumental occasion, we take a deeper look at the current state of U.S.-Bangladesh relations. To discuss the topic with us, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome to today's show, Mr. Peter Haas, U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh. This is his first television appearance in Bangladesh. Mr. Haas, a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, class of Minister Counselor, previously served as Acting Assistant Secretary and concurrently as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs. He also previously served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Trade, Policy and Negotiations, Chairs the Affairs, and Deputy Permanent Representative at the U.S. Mission to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, U.S. Consul General in Mumbai, India, and Economic Counselor at the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, Indonesia. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You joined your office in Bangladesh a few days ago. So far, how is your experience at Bangladesh and how did you find Bangladesh?
So I have to say that I could not have been luckier than to become U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh at this present time. As you mentioned, on April 4th, we'll be celebrating, today we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary of U.S.-Bangladeshi relations. And it's just phenomenal to see where our two countries have come over the past 50 years. Earlier, I went to the National Liberation War Museum, and when I saw the pictures of just 50 years ago, and I see the Bangladesh of today, it's really a triumph. And it's wonderful to be here from that standpoint, but also just the wonderful people. I've had a chance already to travel to Tungipura and to Cox's Bazar, and just to see the breadth of the country and to the hospitality has been absolutely phenomenal.
Sounds good. Mr. Ambassador, you have worked in this region before as U.S. Consul General in Mumbai, India. There is an existence of frustration in this country that the U.S. sees Bangladesh through the lens of India. How do you see that perception, and how would you describe the relationship between Bangladesh and U.S.?
So I would say anyone who tries to look at Bangladesh through the lens of India does so at their own peril. Bangladesh in and of itself is a hugely important country to the United States because of your geographic location, because of your success in development, being on the cusp of middle income status, on the entrepreneurial nature of your people and the growth of the economy. There are so many opportunities here for U.S. companies and investments and U.S. partnership and culture-to-culture ties that I think it's just, like I said, you ignore Bangladesh at your own peril.
And the U.S. has been one of the biggest foreign aid donors of Bangladesh. Most U.S. foreign aid has been directed towards reducing poverty, increasing food safety, and essential developments projects. How will the current scenario be affected due to the graduation of Bangladesh from LDC status?
You're exactly right. In the past 50 years, the United States has provided $8.1 billion of assistance to Bangladesh. And we're currently providing $200 million a year in areas like, as you mentioned, health, education, but also in business development, human rights, labor organization, and a lot of other areas. And I think as time goes by, that we will shift away from some of the pure developmental aspects and move much more onto economic prosperity, governance, and rule of law. And so I see us continuing to be a partner, not in the same ways, but evolving as you do.
And is there any plan of the U.S. government to help Bangladesh recover the losses from the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, so Bangladesh, I have to say, has been amazing in handling the COVID-19 pandemic. From the very beginning, when we had our very first wave, and before it had hit Bangladesh, you helped provide us with face masks at a time when we had massive shortages. And since then, we've returned the favor, I think. We've provided 61 million doses of COVID vaccine, more than we've provided to any other country, and more than any other country has provided to Bangladesh. And we've also provided substantial resources in helping you to make sure that you're getting vaccines to all of the people most at risk. One of the statistics I like to cite is that you now have a higher rate of vaccination of people who have received their first vaccines than the United States does. And that's entirely credit to your country and your ability to reach so many people throughout the land. It's really impressive.
Bangladesh is in the top list.
Yes,
Eighth
absolutely.
in the list, yeah. Ambassador, you are an expert in business and trade. How do you think both countries can develop sustainable business and trade relations?
I think this is a huge growth opportunity for the next 50 years, our ability to expand those relationships. We currently have $10 billion in bilateral trade, of which I have to say you guys are beating us. You export $8 billion to the United States and only import $2 billion of our things. But I see this relationship greatly expanding. We have two things coming up. One is a delegation from the U.S.-Bangladesh Business Council, which will be here in the country in early May. The U.S. BBC was recently formed. It has more than 50 top U.S. companies that are part of it, and they're sending a delegation here to look at the opportunities that Bangladesh offers. And the second thing is that we'll be hosting a bilateral economic, bilateral government meetings in early June to talk about some of the things from a government-to-government standpoint on how we can work together.
Mr. Peter, Bangladesh's main export destinations are the United States and the European Union. However, extremely high dependency on single export of ready-made garments can make the economy of Bangladesh vulnerable. As an experienced in this field, what would be your suggestions to Bangladesh?
Well, first of all, obviously take advantage of what you're already good at. And then second of all, when you look at what Bangladesh is good at, it's not just making garments. It's a well-educated workforce. It's a very entrepreneurial workforce. It's a workforce that's increasingly talented in digital areas and also pharmaceuticals. And so those provide some of the bases for diversifying the economy. And then on top of that, if you layer in economic reforms, greater transparency, rule of law, continuing to fight corruption, you create kind of the ecosystem for the economy to change. The United States was once the world's largest textile exporter, and we're no more. It's just a matter of looking at your strengths and moving on.
And Mr. Peter, you know that the US is the #1 destination for students to pursue higher studies. But one of the issues that arise for Bangladeshi students is the scarcity of funds, especially for those who want to pursue non-STEM courses. Do you think the US can develop more opportunities for Bangladeshi students to study in the United States?
First of all, I'd like to say we love Bangladeshi students in the United States. And in fact, my son's doing a PhD and has a Bangladeshi student in his cohort. And so we absolutely love Bangladeshis to come to the United States. And in fact, you're the 14th largest sender of students and the fastest growing country in terms of students. In terms of paying for it, it's expensive, I grant you that. What we have through the U.S. Embassy is Education USA, and we have these in 4 locations around Bangladesh, 2 here in Dhaka, 1 at the Embassy, 1 at Edward Kennedy Center, and then we have 2 others, 1 in Chittagong and 1 in Khulna. And what these are is they're free, but we have advisors there who can help Bangladeshi students both understand the application process for U.S. universities, help them identify which university might be the perfect fit, but then equally as important is that they will help them navigate them through the financial aid process and how to apply for scholarships. And then on top of that, we also have the Fulbright program, which are fully funded scholarships. And so it's difficult, but there's a way, and we encourage people to speak with our Education USA advisors.
Mr. Peter, what are your observations regarding the current condition of liberal democracy in Bangladesh?
Yeah,
as you are advocating for many years liberal democracy
Right.
across the globe.
Yeah, so I have to say we have concerns. This shouldn't be a surprise. Every year we publish our annual human rights report where we've laid out some of our concerns with the Digital Security Act, about whether it goes too far perhaps in stifling consent. In the past we've expressed concern about elections, we've expressed concern about extrajudicial killings, about forced disappearances. And I'm saying this not to be, to wag my finger. We ourselves have difficulties with democracy in the United States, as I think people have seen from the past couple of years in our efforts on both racism and police use of force. And so I say it as a friend, that it is something that we're concerned about and something that we hope to partner with Bangladesh on improving.
And one of the most newsworthy topic of discussion regarding Bangladesh-US relations lately has been the sanctions imposed by the US on members of Bangladeshi security forces due to human rights violations. From the perspective of the US, what is the state of human rights in Bangladesh?
So again, as I just mentioned, that there are some real concerns. There's also some real highlights, though. Bangladesh has done a phenomenal job in combating human trafficking over the past couple of years and has really gone after that heinous crime. And so it's not all a bad story. Nothing ever is all a bad story. And so there are areas of light, areas of progress. There have recently been a couple of major court cases and verdicts which point to accountability for people who have committed murder. And so there are bright spots, and we continue to look for those bright spots and encourage them.
And Mr. Ambassador, do you think the sanction on RAB and some high officials can affect bilateral relations in the long run?
I don't think it has to. And in fact, one of the things, today your foreign minister will be meeting Secretary Blinken in Washington, D.C. as we're celebrating the 50th anniversary. And a few weeks ago we had our partnership dialogue with you, and the one thing that we stressed is just how wide and multifaceted our partnership is. And so yes, we work on security, and we have done so for many years and continue to work on security. But we also work on the economy, we work on health, we work on education, we advance people-to-people ties, we work on climate change. And so to me, there's a whole wide array of things that we do, and that it would be unfortunate if we focused only on the one area where we have disagreements.
Okay. And there are lots of talks circling Bangladesh and not being invited to the Democracy Summit. What were the reasons, according to you, for Bangladesh and not being invited to the Democracy Summit? Is there any possibility for Bangladesh to be included in similar summits in the future?
So the decision on the inaugural summit was made by geographic diversity, religious diversity, big, small, a whole number of other factors. But the thing that came out of that conference is that President Biden called for all countries to have a year of action on democracy, to make concrete pledges on how they could improve their democracies, how they could help prove to people that democracies deliver for the individual. It's one of the things that we've started discussing with Bangladesh, with your government, about what a year of action might look like for Bangladesh and what kinds of pledges it could make towards democracy. And then obviously we'll see what the White House decides in a year's time when the next summit comes up. But the goal is really that all of us take concrete measures to improve democracy and to advance, including the United States. We're developing our own pledge for this year as well.
And Mr. Peter Haas, the national elections of Bangladesh will take place next year. Does the United States have any plan to observe the fairness of the elections?
Well, I would say that the world will be watching those elections. The people of Bangladesh will be watching the elections. We will certainly be watching the elections. Everyone will be watching the elections to see whether or not there's the opportunity for the people of Bangladesh to express their voice and to choose their next government. And we very much hope that will be the case.
Here's another issue. We'd like to know about the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Biden administration and how the government is planning to deal with the evolving situation. It is widely understood that the strategy is an attempt by the US to maintain its sphere of influence among nations of the Bay of Bengal in competition with China. What role does Bangladesh have in US Indo-Pacific strategy?
First of all, I'd like to say that the common perception of the Indo-Pacific strategy is wrong. It's not meant to expand our sphere of influence. It's meant to present a positive vision of things that we all agree on.
Sometimes we heard that it's an Indo-Pacific strategy, sometimes it's Asia-Pacific strategy.
No, not at all. It's any country bordering on the Indian or Pacific Ocean, including the United States, that we very much view ourselves as an Indo-Pacific country, and we very much view Bangladesh as an Indo-Pacific country. It's really about working with whoever wants to work on it to have a free and open independent or Indo-Pacific, a prosperous one, a secure one, a resilient one, and an interconnected. And what's interesting is when Sheikh Hasina was in Paris last year for a peace conference, her words were very close to the strategy we have of free and open, of prosperous, of inclusive, of all of these things. And so it's really designed to work together with other countries to advance any or all of these that they would like to. Our goal is actually not for it to be a US dominated or a US-centric area, but to be one where each individual sovereign nation has the ability to choose for itself its path forward.
And in recent times, due to the abundance of financial investment and cultural exchange programs from China, the general opinion among the intelligentsia of Bangladesh is becoming more and more favorable towards the Communist Party of China. Do you see this underlying trend as a cause for concern?
I am far more concerned about presenting the positive vision of the United States than I am about that. Again, the belief that I have, President Biden has, of the power of democracy, the power of transparency, the power of the economy, the ability for people to express themselves, rule of law. I think those are visions that are really important, and that's the positive vision that I want to share with the people of Bangladesh.
Great. Mr. Haas, we know that the current administration of the US is very serious about climate change, and the environment and the government has announced to reduce carbon emissions and set a target. Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable nations when it comes to the effects of climate change. And due to our precarious state, Bangladesh has also been a leading voice in advocating for multilateral action toward climate change mitigation and adaptation. What kind of assistance does the U.S. foreign aid policy entail in assisting least developed climate vulnerable nations such as Bangladesh?
No, so first of all, I definitely want to congratulate Bangladesh for the very positive role that it plays, whether through the most vulnerable climate forum or through the Major Economies Forum where Sheikh Hasina spoke last December. Bangladesh is a leader and has a real moral authority on this topic, as you mentioned, because of the impact it's going to have on Bangladesh, and also the fact that Bangladesh contributes very little to greenhouse gas emissions. And so its leadership role in calling on other countries to make deeper cuts as part of mitigation is critical. And also Bangladesh's commitment to have 30% of its energy renewable in the next short period of time is also very valuable. In terms of US assistance, we are looking at it. President Biden has announced a fourfold increase in the amount of climate assistance and financing that we'll be providing. And I know that one of the big issues is how do you divide that financing between mitigation efforts and adaptation efforts. And I'm just starting to learn the Bangladeshi perspective on the need for a lot of that to be focused on adaptation and not just mitigation. But again, a tremendous leader in this issue.
And as you know, that Bangladesh is currently faced with some daunting challenges in coping with almost 1 million migrants who were forced out by the neighboring state of Myanmar. These challenges include an internal governance deficit to deal with transnational crimes, especially due to an influx of illegal drug trade. How can Bangladesh overcome these challenges? And could you suggest some short or long-term measures Bangladesh can take?
Yeah, so last week I visited Cox's Bazar and I visited the Rohingya camps. And I have to say that that this is a tragedy and one that Bangladesh is having to play host to. And so I understand it's not easy, I understand it's expensive, but Bangladesh has played a truly leading role in hosting these refugees. Obviously, everyone's desire is that they be able to return to Burma, but to be able to do so with dignity and with safety. In terms of the issues you brought up of drugs and financial and things like that, to me, I think one of the key things is to figure out, and this is not just Bangladesh's responsibility, but the entire world's responsibility, on how you give these people hope. The access to education with the Myanmar curriculum, ability to have a livelihood so that they have a purpose and that they're developing skills for when they return. And I think if we can do that, some of those other things that you mentioned will help resolve themselves. And so I like to think that even small measures to improve the daily lives of the Rohingya will have enormous benefit on all of the issues you mentioned.
Mr. Peter, the US recently recognized the ongoing ethnic cleansing in Myanmar as an act of genocide. What effect will this have on the role of the US in providing relief for the billions of Rohingya refugees currently sheltering in Bangladesh? Will the US increase the pressure on the Myanmar government to repatriate them, or is there a possible plan to accept refugees like that being done for the refugees from Ukraine?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, the very fact that Secretary Blinken declared it a genocide is another step on our route to trying to convince Burma to take back the refugees. It's an important determination. It's one with a lot of moral authority. It's not one that's taken lightly in the United States. It's only the 8th time that we've declared something a genocide. And so it's hugely meaningful. We're combining that with a lot of sanctions on the Burmese military, on Burmese entities, on those responsible for the violence. And I imagine that that will continue. In the meantime, we continue to provide assistance to the refugees. Last week, I announced $152 million of new American funding to be able to help both in the camps themselves and for the host countries around. So this is something that we will, or the host communities, I'm sorry. So this is something we will continue to be pushing on. We will continue to be providing pressure on Burma to create the conditions where that they can return. And we'll be continuing to look at other possible solutions to help alleviate the burden and give these people dignity.
Great. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused many issues in many aspects. We have seen the governments of the US and other NATO allies put sanctions on Russia and its very ally Belarus. Though the Russian economy is bleeding from the sanction, there is no sign of Russia backing off from Ukraine. How does the US plan to deal with this challenging situation?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to thank and to recognize Bangladesh for its most recent vote at the UN General Assembly. And as Sheikh Hasina said, it's based on some principles we all share. sovereignty, national sovereignty, non-interference, peace, not attacking civilians. And so I really welcome Bangladesh's decision to support that last resolution and to support some of those fundamental principles of the United Nations and just common decency. The second, this was a war of choice by Russia. It's absolutely atrocious. We spent months trying to get Russia and Ukraine to negotiate this issue. Russia refused. Instead, they decided to invade Ukraine. They decided to attack civilians. They decided not to allow humanitarian access. And so I can't predict how it will end, but I don't think Russia will emerge from it as a stronger Russia. And I think it's something that the international community will continue to condemn.
Mr. Ambassador, we have recently seen rising support from India for Putin's aggression. India is also reportedly in talks to buy Russian oil at a discount and is seeking to find ways to maintain trade relations despite the West sanctions against Moscow. Does the Indian stance on this issue bother the US?
I go back to the point that we ask all countries to respect a few basic principles. Integrity, territorial integrity, the avoidance of force, the non-targeting of civilians, the non-destruction. And so we're focusing more on encouraging countries to support an end to the war and to call for a ceasefire so that we can move on to the next phase.
And what do you think the next 15 years of US-Bangladesh relations will look like? What kind of plan does the US mission in Bangladesh have to bolster cultural exchange and strengthen cultural ties with Bangladesh?
Yeah. No, so I think the next 15 years look great, and I hope I spend my next couple of years getting it off to a good start. As I mentioned earlier, I can see these next 15 years being one characterized by ever greater people-to-people exchanges, both from businesses and Bangladeshi businesses exporting to the US companies investing here, sharing technology, but also, as you said, of students going back and forth. And of course, it's also important to remember the diaspora and the large number of Bangladeshi Americans who are in the United States, who continue to travel back and forth and who continue to serve as a bridge between the two countries, being citizens of both. And so I only see positive things for the next 15 years, and I can't wait to see it.
And Mr. Ambassador, you know that the holy month of Ramadan started. Do you want to say something to the Muslim population of Bangladesh?
Yeah, so this is the third Muslim majority country that I have lived and served in, and then on top of that I lived and served in Mumbai, where there's a very large Muslim population. And I've always been impressed during the holy month of Ramadan by seeing people's devotion, not only to the religion, but to each other, to their families, to that chance to reflect. And so I would only like to say Ramadan Mubarak to everyone.
Great. And is there anything you would like to add or to share with our viewers?
Yeah, I think the only thing is I just really want to make sure that people sense this excitement that I have for the future of our two countries together and the partnership that we already have and how further we can build on it. And so I'm just really excited to see all the corners of Bangladesh and to see what we can do to take a good relationship and make it really great.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. Your insight has been most illuminating regarding these pertinent issues. Dear viewers, recently there have been several significant developments in the relationship between Bangladesh and the United States of America. The reception to these developments has been divisive. The sanctions imposed on members of Bangladesh security forces, the recent acknowledgement of the genocide committed by Myanmar, and the exclusion of Bangladesh from the Democracy Summit have all had rippling effects on the perspectives the Bangladeshi people have of the USA. The war in Ukraine has now brought regional military security into the limelight, and perhaps we may see further military cooperation between Bangladesh and the USA as a result. But the lingering effect of the Rohingya refugee crisis in Bangladesh is a matter that the Bangladeshi people feel is being sidelined by the nations who have the most power to do something about it. There is also the issue of what kind of support the US government will provide to facilitate the development of democracy in a country that is warming up to China and the CCP. We observe with a bated breath in anticipation of developments in the coming days. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us for today's show. Please look forward for more to come. Thank you so much.